She didn't beg, didn't explain. Just asked for a seat on the next Black Hawk. North, no rank pulled, no name dropped. They waved her off without a glance. Until a colonel saw the patch on her sleeve and said 4 words that changed everything. "Where did you get that?" This is the story of a soldier the system forgot, and the day it had to remember. If stories of quiet honor and long-kept promises matter to you, hit subscribe and let us know where you're watching from. Now, let's go back to the flight line at Camp Thornfield. Camp Thornfield was already in motion by 800. The desert sun pressed down hard across the concrete, turning every steel surface into a skillet. Ground crews moved between helicopters and fuel trucks with the urgency of routine. Radios crackled, rotor blades began their slow spin, and the air smelled of heat, fuel, and baked sand. No one paid attention to the woman crossing the tarmac. She moved without hesitation, boots striking the red grit in measured steps. Her posture was straight, but one shoulder dipped slightly beneath the weight of a heavy duffel. The limp on her right side was minor, but not new. She wore a sun-faded flight jacket, zipped halfway, sleeves rolled. No name tag, no visible rank. Just a soldier's quiet presence in a place that didn't seem to recognize her. She walked past a group of junior officers waiting for transport. They didn't give her a second look. Their uniforms were clean, radios clipped high, conversation light. She kept walking. At the edge of the flight line, 2 military police officers manned the checkpoint. One young Private Cody Miller, the other older Sergeant Larry Jenkins. They stood near a stack of cargo pallets, clipboard in hand, posture firm. She stopped in front of them and spoke clearly. "Sergeant First Class Rachel Moore. I'm requesting space on that Black Hawk to Northern Ridge FOB. It's urgent." Private Miller didn't look up. "Not on the manifest, ma'am," he said, flipping a page. "No walk-ons authorized." Rachel waited a beat, then gave a single nod. Understood. She stepped aside without protest, walked a few paces back, and sat on a rusted ammo crate along the fence line. Her duffel dropped to the ground with a soft thud beside her boot. She settled in like she'd done it before because she had. A few yards away, the crew of the waiting Black Hawk was completing their final checks. The rotors ticked over in low idle. Another flight crew laughed near the mess line, unaware or unconcerned. Rachel adjusted her jacket. As she did, the edge of a patch on her upper sleeve shifted into view. It was small, worn thin, and blended with the fabric. Gray on gray, easy to miss. But not impossible. Corporal Ben Turner, a mechanic refueling a nearby Apache, caught it from the corner of his eye. His hands paused. He said nothing. At the far end of the tarmac, the operations tent door swung open. Out stepped Colonel Thomas Hale. He walked briskly, radio in hand, giving clipped orders about supply coordination and convoy timing. His uniform was regulation pressed, his boots broken in, his gait exact. He wasn't someone who missed details. He was halfway across the open space when something caught his eye. He stopped in place, mid-stride, his gaze locked on Rachel. Not because of her face, not her posture, not her request, but because of the patch. Subtle, faded, nearly erased by time, but real. And for someone like him, unmistakable. He hadn't seen one since Mosul. He lowered the radio slowly. The noise around him, the engines, the boots, the shouting, seemed to fall away. That patch wasn't supposed to be out here. And if it was, then she wasn't just another walk-on hoping to catch a ride. She was something else. And suddenly, nothing about this flight line felt routine anymore. Camp Thornfield didn't have quiet hours. It ran day and night, built to push people and supplies toward the front line. There was no pause, only rotation. The heat settled low across the tarmac. Dust moved constantly, stirred by tires and boots. Forklifts carried crates between hangars. Helicopter crews shouted over the growing hum of rotors. You could hear the sharp clicks of loading straps and the thud of cargo doors closing every few minutes. Rachel Moore sat off to the side, just outside the flight line, on an old ammo crate no one had touched in years. Her duffel sat at her feet. She'd already tried to ask for a seat on the Black Hawk heading north, and been denied. No name on the manifest, no exceptions. Now, she waited. Her jacket didn't have a name tag, no rank, no visible unit patch. just a faded olive flight jacket zipped halfway. The collar stitching was frayed, her boots were broken in, but clean. The limp in her right leg was small but constant, the result of a blast injury in Syria that she never brought up unless a doctor asked. She kept her hands loosely crossed, watching the activity on the ramp. She didn't stare, didn't follow anyone with her eyes, she just observed. Behind her, 3 young lieutenants passed, talking casually and laughing about something from the chow hall. They were clean-cut, fresh uniforms, radios clipped to their vests. None of them looked her way. She didn't expect them to. In their eyes, she didn't fit anywhere. No patch, no name, no unit badge. Just another older vet passing through, or so they thought. Rachel moved her legs slightly to ease the pressure on her knee. That's all the injury was now, management. You didn't get rid of pain like that. You adjusted. Her left wrist held a short piece of old paracord. Faded, knotted. She'd tied it there years ago and never taken it off. It wasn't for show. It reminded her of someone. That was enough. As she leaned forward, the edge of a patch on her left upper sleeve shifted into view. It was a simple piece of Velcro, dark gray, threadbare. The image barely visible. A black phoenix over a downward-pointing dagger. No text, no color. It wasn't meant to stand out. Only a few people in the military would know what it meant. Most wouldn't even notice it. Rachel didn't adjust it. She left it the way it was. Nearby, a mechanic Corporal Ben Turner glanced up from a refueling job on an Apache. He saw the patch. His hands paused for half a second. Then he looked away and kept working. He didn't say anything. Across the tarmac, the Black Hawk crew was almost ready. The rotors were spinning faster now. 2 soldiers loaded the last of the stretchers. A medic in tan gloves was checking clamps on the overhead harness. Rachel watched without expression. The MPs were still at the checkpoint, checking names, pointing at clipboards, waving through those who were cleared to go. She wasn't one of them. She reached down and moved her duffel a few inches closer to her boot. The weight of it pressed against her leg. Nothing in the bag was unusual. A spare shirt, water bottle, trauma shears, a field log. She had packed fast, but packed for a reason. The jacket shifted again with the motion, and more of the patch showed, but still, no one said a word. Rachel didn't move. She'd waited in worse places under fire, in blackout zones, behind enemy lines. This wasn't hard. It was just familiar. The sun had climbed higher. Shadows shortened. Heat came up through the concrete now, not just from above. Rachel stood again and walked back toward the checkpoint, this time stopping closer to Sergeant Larry Jenkins. He was older than the private beside him, probably seen a few more things, probably had a little more say. She kept her voice clear and steady. "Sergeant," she said, "I was told there's a medevac going north. I'm trying to reach a soldier at Northern Ridge. It's time sensitive." Jenkins looked up. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he exhaled hard through his nose and scratched under his vest. "You're not on the list, Sergeant," he said flatly. "That's the end of it. Manifest locked. Not our call to make." "I understand," Rachel replied. She didn't ask again. She didn't plead. She just nodded and stepped away, same way she had the first time. The ammo crate was still there. This time she sat slower. Her right leg was tightening up under the heat. She didn't show it on her face. She placed her hands flat on her thighs and looked straight ahead. Across the tarmac, a small group of soldiers was walking out of the motor pool. 2 of them, both second lieutenants by the tabs on their collars, were in mid-conversation, voices louder than necessary. One of them pointed vaguely toward the flight line checkpoint. "Look at her," said Lieutenant Jake Callahan, tilting his chin toward Rachel. "Probably some desk clerk who wants a war story." Lieutenant Eric Barnes chuckled. "Looks like she missed the recruiting booth by 20 years. Rachel heard them, every word. She didn't turn, didn't blink. Her right hand closed around the strap of her duffel bag just once, then let go. Callahan kept walking, still grinning. Barnes followed, shrugging. No one corrected them. No one told them to stop. The sergeant at the gate gave them a quick nod as they passed. They waved back and kept going toward the crew line. Not a single glance in her direction. Rachel leaned forward slightly, adjusting the position of her foot. The rotors on the Black Hawk had picked up speed, throwing sand and warm air into short bursts along the runway. She blinked into the wind but stayed where she was. She'd seen the type before. Young, confident, full of lessons they hadn't learned yet. She didn't hate them for it, but she didn't respect it either. People like that didn't know what silence was like when it followed the last radio call, or how long you could go without blinking when you're scanning a ridgeline for muzzle flash. They hadn't lost people they remembered by voice, but not by name, because the missions had no records. She shifted her eyes toward the Black Hawk again. Still time. Still a chance. But if no one was going to speak for her, that was fine. She'd done it without help before. And if this was how it played out, one more rejection, one more empty seat flying north, then at least she had tried. What mattered wasn't what people around her thought. It was who was waiting on the other end. 12 hours earlier, Rachel had been standing in the corner of a motor pool garage at Forward Station Kinney, wrapping up a brief support rotation. Her bag wasn't even unpacked yet. The call came through a secured field device. Most people thought those lines were disconnected long ago. They weren't. She didn't recognize the code prefix, but she answered anyway. A pause. Then static. Sergeant Moore? Ma'am, is that you? She knew the voice. Davis? Jamal Davis, ma'am. From Sand Creek team. 8 years ago. You probably don't remember. I remember, she said flat. His voice cracked. I got hit during the last push. Took shrapnel to the chest. The field docs patched me up, but they're talking surgery now. Evac says I might have to wait a day, maybe longer. He paused, then added quietly, I'm scared, ma'am. I asked them if someone could reach you. I didn't think they would. Rachel didn't speak right away. Her eyes settled on the wall behind the motor pool workbench, chip paint, a faded clock, and a small clipboard no one had touched in days. She looked back at the device. Where are you now? Northern Ridge, FOB 9. They moved me there this morning. She gave one nod, even though he couldn't see it. You called the right person. I know it's not by the book. It never is. She didn't say I'm coming. She just set the device down, zipped her bag shut, and picked it up. She moved fast. No forms, no signatures, no chain of command. Just action. On her way out the door, she tossed a pen and a small notebook into her duffel. She didn't need a plan, she needed a ride. And one way or another, she'd find one. Because when a soldier asks for you by name after all these years, you don't check policy. You move. You protect your own, she muttered to herself, tightening the strap across her shoulder. Even if no one else remembers them anymore. The sun kept rising, the temperature passed 90 and kept climbing. The tarmac shimmered, metal burned on contact. Rachel stayed on the crate. No shade, no invitation. She was still waiting. Behind her, the young officers circled back from the chow tent. Now there were 3 Callahan, Barnes, and a new one, Lieutenant Ryan Brooks, all of them younger than the jacket Rachel was wearing. Brooks pointed toward her with a half smile. She's still sitting there? Callahan smirked. She's not going anywhere. Barnes added, probably thinks somebody owes her something. They all laughed, not bothering to lower their voices. Rachel heard every word. She didn't turn around. Her hands rested calmly on her thighs. Her eyes stayed fixed on the Black Hawk. No one had spoken to her since the rejection. No one had asked why she was there or who she was. She was just another body near the edge of the flight line, too quiet to matter. The chopper's rotors were spinning faster now. Its crew was doing final walkarounds, checking tail rotor clearance and fuel pressure. One medic ran back to the hangar to grab an extra trauma kit. Time was running short. A few yards away, Corporal Ben Turner stood on a rolling ladder, fueling an Apache. He had been working in silence, head down, ear protection in place. But something pulled his attention, a shift in movement, a color out of place. He looked up. Rachel had adjusted her jacket, just enough to push the left sleeve back from her elbow. There it was, the patch. Small, frayed, barely visible. Ben froze. His eyes locked on it. His hand holding the fueling nozzle began to shake slightly. He knew what it was. Most people wouldn't. Most people wouldn't think twice. But Ben Turner had served 3 years ago with someone who wore that same symbol. That man never came back from Kandahar. And when the debrief came, they said, there's no record of that unit. Ben was told to stop asking. Now, standing 10 feet from a woman sitting alone with that exact same patch on her sleeve, he didn't know what to do. He stared for a second longer, then looked away. He steadied his hand and went back to fueling. No questions. No conversation. Rachel didn't notice him. Or if she did, she gave no sign. She looked up toward the helicopter again. The engines were louder now. The sound rolled across the flight line in short bursts. She took a breath. Not heavy, not forced, just enough to remind herself of what was at stake. If the bird lifted off without her, she'd have no way to reach Jamal Davis in time. And if she failed, it wouldn't be because of her rank, or her silence, or a missing signature. It would be because the system around her refused to look closer. Rachel reached for the strap of her duffel again. Her fingers tensed around the canvas. She didn't squeeze, just held it steady. The young lieutenants kept talking behind her, voices lighter now, confident. None of them saw it. None of them cared. But she did. Because she knew what it meant to wait on someone who never showed up. And this time she wasn't going to be the one who didn't show. Colonel Thomas Hale stepped out of the ops tent with a radio still in his hand. He was in the middle of calling for an updated manifest report when he spotted her. At first it was just a glance. He saw the woman near the edge of the flight line. Older, alone, still as a statue. Then his eyes landed on her sleeve. He stopped walking. His voice trailed off mid-sentence. The patch. Faded, charcoal gray, a phoenix, wings stretched wide, rising over a downward-pointing dagger. No unit name, no branch, just the symbol. Hale stared at it. He hadn't seen that patch in 16 years. Not since Mosul, 2009. Shadow Ascent. He lowered the radio slowly, as if his hands had forgotten how to move. Without a word, he changed direction. He walked straight toward her, past the refueling teams, past the officers still standing by the flight list, past the MP gate. He didn't look at anyone else. Rachel saw him coming. She didn't stand. She didn't smile. She just watched him approach, her face steady. When he reached her, he stopped 3 feet away. He didn't say ma'am or sergeant. He didn't ask who she was. He asked the only question that mattered. Shadow Ascent, Mosul, 2009? She nodded once. Rear extraction, eastern wall. You were pinned down. Hale swallowed hard. And you were the tail gunner. Rachel didn't reply. She didn't need to. He remembered now. The deafening fire, the crumbling wall, the black hawk that appeared without warning. How the door gunner never looked back, just laid down cover until the last boots were on board. He had told himself it was a ghost op, that no one from that team had survived. No records, no names, just rumors. And yet here she was. The patch had survived. So had she. Behind him, voices died out. The MP at the gate stopped mid-sentence. One of the young lieutenants whispered, "What the hell is Shadow Ascent?" No one answered. Because no one in that circle had the clearance or the experience to know. Colonel Hale turned slowly, his eyes sweeping the group around him. Then he raised his voice just enough to cut through the engine noise. "Get me the flight lead, now." The mechanic near the Apache stepped back. One of the MPs took off running. Rachel stood. She didn't speak. She didn't explain. But her presence and the patch on her arm had already done both. Everything else had changed. And now, the rest of them were catching up. The air around the flight line felt different now. Colonel Thomas Hale stood still for just a second longer. Then he turned to the nearest MP. "Get me the flight lead, now." The MP didn't ask why. He ran, full sprint, toward the hangar. Rachel Moore stood slowly, lifting her duffel with both hands. She didn't look around. She didn't have to. Everyone was already watching her. The group of young officers had gone quiet. Lieutenant Ryan Brooks was the first to speak. "Sir," he started, "there's no record of that unit." Hale looked at him directly. Not angry, just firm. "I know," he said. Captain Reese, the flight lead, arrived a few moments later. He was out of breath, clipboard still in hand. "Colonel?" Hale didn't waste time. He gestured toward Rachel. "This is Sergeant First Class Rachel Moore, Shadow Ascent, Mosul 2009. She flew tail gun on the rear extraction at Eastern Wall." Reese looked at Rachel, then at the patch on her sleeve. Recognition didn't flash in his face. He wasn't cleared for that. But he nodded respectfully. "She's not on the manifest, sir," Reese said carefully. Hale didn't blink. "She is now." Reese hesitated. Sir, we've got full medevac load. Then make room, Hale said, voice steady. Take someone off, or adjust the load chart. I don't care if it's a clipboard or a case of rations, but that helicopter leaves with her on board. One of the MPs, Sergeant Jenkins, stepped forward. Colonel, that'll cause a delay. We'd need to rescan weight. You've got 4 minutes, Hale interrupted. Unless you want me calling the base commander and having this whole line reassigned. Silence. Rachel hadn't said a word. She reached for the strap across her duffel and swung it over her shoulder. Her movement was smooth, practiced. Her boots shifted on the hot concrete, knees slightly bent from the pain that never quite left. Her eyes were steady, but there was something new behind them now, something fragile. Not weakness. Something closer to relief. No tears, no shaking, just the quiet feeling of being seen again after a long time living invisible. Captain Reese turned to his crew. Get her gear on that bird. The medics responded immediately. No one questioned it. A stretcher was repositioned. One soldier got bumped to the next rotation. Nobody argued. Rachel stepped forward, walking past the same 3 lieutenants who had been mocking her less than 10 minutes earlier. Callahan looked down. Barnes scratched the back of his neck. Brooks, to his credit, took a step forward. Ma'am, he said awkwardly. I didn't know. Rachel stopped in front of him. Her eyes didn't narrow. Her jaw didn't tighten. She just looked at him, a long, even look. You didn't ask, she said. Then she kept walking. Colonel Hale followed her a few paces behind, stopping just short of the boarding ramp. As she approached the aircraft, he called her name once. More. She turned slightly. This isn't a favor, he said. I want that understood. Rachel nodded. I know. You're not here because of who you were. You're here because of what you still are. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. They both understood. The crew chief helped her onto the ramp. She walked slow but steady. Every step up the ladder was deliberate, careful. The duffel weighed less than it looked. She'd carried heavier, much heavier, in places that didn't have landing zones. Inside the helicopter, the medic handed her a headset and a harness line. She clipped in without assistance. Outside, the rotors spun faster. Colonel Hale took one step back and raised his hand in salute. For a moment, no one else moved. Then, one by one, those standing nearby followed. MPs, crew, even the young officers who didn't know what they were looking at. They all saluted. Not because she asked, but because now they knew. The helicopter shifted under its own power, rotors cutting heavy through the air. The crew moved quickly, no wasted motion. A final crate was secured. A door was pulled tight and latched. Rachel sat along the left wall, strapped in, her bag tucked under her knees. The headset covered half her face. She didn't speak. She looked down at the tarmac just once. The Black Hawk lifted gently off the ground, climbed 20 feet, then banked east toward the horizon. Inside, the engine noise filled the space, constant and familiar. No small talk, just the rhythmic pulse of machinery and mission. Across from her sat a young medic, maybe 22. He didn't ask questions, just nodded once. Rachel nodded back. She pulled her sleeve down slightly, covering the patch again. It had done what it needed to do. Below them, Camp Thornfield shrank into the desert floor. The men and women on the flight line returned to their routines, but they would talk about this later quietly, between shifts. About the woman with no name tag. About the colonel who saluted her. Near the base of the aircraft ramp, Lieutenant Ryan Brooks stood silently. He hadn't moved since she boarded. As the Black Hawk rose out of view, he turned to Colonel Hale. What was that unit? He asked. Hale didn't answer. Not directly. She belonged to something we don't brief anymore, he said. And she answered a call most of us will never hear. Brooks nodded once. He didn't say anything else. The helicopter leveled off. Rachel sat still. Her right leg ached, but she ignored it. The pain was familiar. It didn't slow her anymore. In her head, she could still hear Jamal's voice. That mix of fear and trust, the kind only a soldier would send across a broken channel, hoping someone like her still picked up. He had asked for her by name. That mattered. And now, she was on her way. She didn't wear medals. She didn't speak in long stories. She didn't carry a resume, but she kept a promise. And for someone like her, that was everything. Outside, the desert rolled beneath the bird's belly. Sunlight flared through the side glass. Inside, Rachel closed her eyes for a moment, just to rest. As the helicopter pushed north, the patch on her sleeve shifted gently with the air. Worn gray. Edges frayed. But still there. Still real. Still hers. Sometimes, the most important things we carry don't fit in a bag. They're the promises we made when no one was looking. Rachel Moore didn't ask for special treatment. She didn't wear her history on her sleeve. But when the moment came, her quiet service spoke louder than any medal ever could. This story reminds us that true honor doesn't shout. It endures. It waits. And when the time is right, it stands up not to be praised, but to be useful one more time. For those of you watching who've served, supported, or simply believed in something greater than yourselves, you know that feeling. The world may move fast and forgetful, but dignity never gets old. It only grows quieter and stronger. If this story moved you, please subscribe to hear more untold chapters from lives of service and sacrifice. We tell these stories because they matter and because someone out there still needs to hear them. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Until next time, take care of each other, walk with purpose, and never underestimate the power of being the one who shows up even when no one expects it. God bless, and goodbye for now.